Greetings from TV AIBD. This is Philomena Pragasam, and today we will be talking to Dr. Fintan, CEO of Ideal Systems in Southeast Asia. Welcome to TV AIBD, Fintan. Good to see you today.
Thank you, and good to see you, Philomena. Thank you very much for having me today.
So I'd like to ask you about the broadcasting industry. You've been working in the industry for quite a long time, and in several areas you've been with providing systems to CNN, to Astro, to RTM. So tell me, Fintan, how do you view the development of the broadcasting industry where technology is concerned? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting. Certainly in the light of the pandemic, it's very interesting, and it certainly has the pandemic has certainly had an effect on technology for the broadcast business. I believe the pandemic has really has acted as a catalyst for an underlying technology migration that was already there. And this is often the case. Technology tends to take its course. The speed of the course of that technology often speeds up and slows down. So I believe COVID-19 globally has had a direct impact on the speed and implementation of some new technologies for the broadcast business. And I think that the biggest one there is probably the cloud technologies. And especially in light of what you just said there in Malaysia with the MCO, the movement control orders, and that's not this is a global phenomenon. There's the whole world has had these issues of lockdowns and restricted movements and repeated lockdowns, and of course. There's two major aspects of this, and actually there's a number of major aspects of this that really hit the broadcast business. One is how broadcast operatives work. Certainly you take the Malaysian perspective, for example, your national broadcaster RTM, people have to still get in to Angkasa Puri and get into the various locations. And what happens if there's an outbreak within that, in a control room for a studio or something like that. These are things that people have had to manage all over the world, not just in Malaysia. And the other kind of key part is there's really been quite a movement towards quality of news and quality of production in terms of everybody looking for information too. So I think during the pandemic, and it's still the case now for a lot of people, while governments are trying to roll out vaccinations, and there's a lot of information overload to a certain degree, and people are looking for accurate information. And of course, the people over the last number of years, people have got information from social media and so on, and it's very easy to have misinformation because a lot of information that becomes available on social media isn't backed, isn't substantiated the way a national news channel or the traditional news, shall we say, have to validate their sources and so on. And people recognize this to a certain degree. And I think there's been a big push back for people to get new, quality news, because this is a direct health issue that affects them. So you've got more demand for traditional broadcast. You've got restrictions on how you create your broadcast with restriction orders, which kind of really promotes certain elements of cloud technology.
Yeah, Fintan, you can go on and on. I think this is because it's such a passionate topic for you. But you brought out something very interesting. That is how during the pandemic, social media has been a very big player, whereby it's been giving a lot of information. And so we term it as an infodemic that has taken place. And some of these infodemic is not really helping because we don't know the sources. The sources are not verified. The credibility of the information is also something which is questionable. So these are some of the challenges that have been happening during this pandemic. However, I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel because you've been in the Southeast Asia region, you've been in, I'm sure, in other parts of Asia, and you've seen how the shift from traditional media to social media platforms. You've seen that shift, I'm sure, Fintan, right? And so how do you think? You mentioned a little bit on remote broadcasting. We're going to come to that, but tell me, what are some of the lessons I would say that the viewership on traditional media has seen an all-time rise, and if previously people were locked in with their handphones or laptops, there was actually some family time viewing, according to research. I don't know how it's like in Singapore. Singapore, you've got MediaCorp, you've got a few other channels running. But how do you view this as someone in the broadcasting arena? This is definitely means that broadcasting is still, the traditional form of broadcasting is still very vital. What's your take on that, Fintan?
I'm smiling because there's certain aspects of the pandemic which have been quite intriguing, and here in Singapore, the pandemic has been well managed, but one of the methods of that management has been by restricting international travel. So, and I think a lot of people in Singapore tend to, because of its ease, just going to JB for the weekend, for example. So a lot of people who used to travel a lot, even for weekend travel, even for shopping and so on, haven't. And what has been very kind of interesting is and not just a return to traditional media and television, but it's a return almost to traditional values. And I live between two parks in Singapore. And I can tell you that before the pandemic, those parks, I was one of very few people with my wife when we would go cycling through the parks. And certainly during the pandemic, the parks look like parks used to look in 100 years ago. They're full of people having picnics and on bicycles and people out doing what people had been moving away from. So it's quite interesting that there's it slightly digresses, but it to a certain point it's related as well, because yet you have families staying at home and you have families sitting around the television. And that is very much about being locked down, so without a doubt, the viewership of traditional and linear television has massively increased, but the viewership and consumption of television as a whole has increased. So the Netflix, the Disney Pluses, all of the OTT operators are massively up on the back of the pandemic too, and that but people like variety. So and again, a drive to news and current affairs has been really a key part, and people want to know what's going on. And with COVID, the news has been thick, heavy, and fast moving, fast changing. The COVID restrictions, the advances in the vaccinations of people. There's this hunger for news, and it's a machine. So yeah.
So that's right. So sometimes I think that the constant need for the correct information, especially in this pandemic, and television is actually providing this. Broadcasters are doing that with the constant news. I think in Singapore, in Malaysia, we have a dedicated channel for COVID news, right? And this is not only in Malaysia, but also in many parts of Southeast Asia and other parts of Asia as well. So let's move to television, right? So, you get families actually watching OTT platform or OTT made content, made for OTT content on television as well, because they're sitting around with their families. Like you said, parks are not parks, and children are not allowed to go out. So everyone's going into the virtual world. And so sometimes, sitting together with families watching television is making a comeback. We can see this in India, where people are actually rebroadcasting the old programs. And I've seen a lot on Twitter and comments that are coming up that these programs are really popular with the entire family. And these are series that were made like 20 years ago, perhaps. Yeah. So I'm also looking at how you, from the the industry and the technology industry, which has been really changing and going through a lot of innovation. Tell me, what new technologies should we really look at to make traditional media more exciting? Now, if you talk to traditional media broadcasters, they would say that TV is never going to die or radio is going to be there forever. But let's talk about TV. What do you think are some of the new technologies that broadcasters can look at to make it more exciting?
Yeah, I think exciting. So obviously we work on we work on both sides. We work on the back end technology, which is not the exciting part. It's the plumbing of broadcasters, and to a certain degree, that's where I've been talking to you before about cloud technologies. But I think in terms of exciting that the viewers see, and in terms of exciting vis-a-vis content creation, and also again to a certain degree, probably sped up a little bit by COVID, is the drive for more augmented reality and virtual reality and XR production. And there's some new techniques out now using large format LED walls as moving backdrops. Instead of shooting on location, for example. And this can be a big thing during COVID where there's travel restrictions and people can't move around. So there's definitely been a lot more people looking at the use of this technology, and to the degree that they've been getting fantastic effects with this type of production technology, right? And with a small crew in a relatively small space, so existing studios can be reconfigured to shoot in XR. And allows a huge amount of creativity for the content producers to make various types of content. And the other interesting thing about these technologies as well is the price point has come down. Broadcasters have been facing headwinds for a long time competitively. So the good news is this type of production technology is coming down in price to the degree that it's not just being used by broadcasters. In fact, probably the biggest rollout of studios at the moment, and the biggest rollout of and build out of virtual sets, be they AR or VR, is in the corporate sector during COVID, because you can imagine that all the corporations out there who had big seminar rooms and big conference rooms and used to bring customers and clients in, and and that hasn't been possible during COVID. So a lot of these are getting refurbed into studios, and using virtual sets, using even main sets to stream corporate information. So while there's been a push for the broadcasters to figure out how we can still create content under lockdown, and that's helped, the same kind of pain point has been hitting the corporate world as well. How do they get their company and corporate information out? So there's actually a big drive and I would say almost an explosive drive in the build out of these mini studios, if you like. And the thing with technologies like XR is the footprint, the physical space, it can be a lot smaller. Obviously, more traditional broadcast studios can get very vast, but in this instance, and especially during COVID, you've no studio audience. You really condense everything to this small physical footprint, which allows for this huge flexibility because of the underlying technology. So I think XR being the VR and the AR, augmented reality, virtual reality, with these really high resolution LED walls, that's coming on very fast. There's a lot of companies and a lot of people working with that, quite new. And then when the content for the production of that content, again, you don't want everybody coming in. You don't want offices full of people at the moment during COVID. So pushing that to the cloud, pushing that content to the cloud, people doing editing in the cloud. So again, utilizing the cloud as well. So these technologies that, and there are quite a few coming, and I think some technologies that have been coming along, they've been slowed up. So you've got 5G out there, for example, which was going to be the news story of 2021. It's been put on the back burner, so that whole 5G is going to play in, especially for remote productions, remote sports productions, all that sort of stuff. I think 5G will play in there a lot, but at this moment in time, there isn't a whole lot of live sports. And again, just talking about that and looking at the likelihood of how the Olympics will play out in Japan in a few weeks' time. Where they're discussing, current discussions are that maybe there's no audience, just due to the risk, in which case all viewership will be by television. There won't be anybody there. So that's going to be a massive drive. And the production crews locally much smaller. So again, all this is going to be driving remote production. It's such a huge area. Like I say, we've got a limited time here, and it's a very wide and broad scope. And
absolutely, Fintan.
TV AIBD, a platform connecting the world virtually, bringing to your screen a plethora of real-time informative content. Everything from the latest trends in immersive technologies, regional media stories, insight from world leaders, and industry intelligentsia, empowering broadcasters worldwide. Connect with TV AIBD now, connecting the world.
The thing is, you said it very nicely. I've been seeing tennis actually, and without an audience, and you know how tennis is like. I think the recent ones you could see some audience in Europe. But last year, when there was this Australian Open and a few other games, you could just see that the audience was completely lacking, And I was just asking myself, how do these players feel, because they were so used to so much of, you're playing for the audience, and sometimes, that's what makes you going as well, keeping you motivated. So playing to an empty stadium was something that was something new. Right, life in the new.
It was, the technology people were in trying to figure out how to help out, and they were bringing in artificial crowd noise in English soccer, and certainly the sports guys have had a rough period of time, but not all of them. The esports people have been having an absolute boom. So esports. And coincidentally, the technology development in esport is now spilling back into broadcast. So you've got the graphics, the 3D graphic rendering engines that were really developed for esports and gaming are now coming back into the broadcast space and driving a lot of the virtual studio technology. So the virtual studio technology, and for a broadcaster a number of years ago, the only kind of chroma set that was used on a regular basis was probably the weather forecast person, and we all sat at home and got a little bit of a laugh when they were pointing in the wrong direction because they're in there pointing at a green wall. But that technology, leveraging the developments from the video game industry and the e-gaming industry, that's come on a lot. So and again, this really helps the broadcasters because that technology has got so good, you can do, and the price point has dramatically come down as well. Because the reason broadcasters face, and the reason a lot of the broadcast technology is expensive is because, relatively speaking, the broadcast industry is a very small market. There's only a small number of broadcasters in every country, so typically the equipment was very specialized. But where broadcast can leverage on a larger community, and this has been happening for the last 10 years or so and more, where the broadcast hardware moved onto software and it moved onto standard IT. So you could buy the servers from HP and Dell and these guys. Now it's moving into IP, it's moving into cloud, and all the underlying technology is COTS, is common off the shelf hardware. And in the cloud, it will be the same cloud that everybody else uses. So the costs are coming down and down and down, which is great news for broadcasters. I mean, broadcasters need a break, and the underlying continued reduction in the cost of their systems is great, because they can leverage much bigger industries with higher volumes, higher R&D budgets, and reuse it very effectively for broadcast.
So it's a huge competition out there, and like you said, you're playing with a small group of players as well. Where broadcasting technology is concerned, and Fintan, I have to tell you that even when I speak with some countries, we have members in other parts of the region, such as Africa and so forth, and they've asked me questions like, "Philo, can we just focus on social media? Because why do we need broadcasting equipment?" So, and I told them, television is still so important, and it's not going to go off. So you need to have that technology to keep going at your traditional media. And a while ago, Fintan, you mentioned about immersive technologies. You said esports. These kind of things are really, really booming and really having a very good time during this period. But tell me, are normal television sets that people have, are they able to, support this kind of immersive technologies we're talking about?
Well, this is really up to the television operators. I mean, from my home service in Singapore that I have with SingTel, I've got a few channels that are designated just to video games and video gaming. And anecdotally, somebody who'll remain nameless on this, but an older friend of mine who lives in the United States was talking to his sons about this car racing that he was watching, and he says that there must be some amazing new material that they're making the cars out of, because they seem to be crashing and continuing on. And he was watching esports, and the graphics had got so good that it looked super real. He really thought he was watching a car race, and the cars were crashing and they weren't denting, so to speak. So yeah, I mean, it's another form of entertainment, and people like to watch these as streamed shows, not just participate. And again, from the COVID perspective, you can have multiplayer games without anybody moving anywhere, and then transmit the output. It can go to social media, but it can go to linear TV just as easily as well. But the nature of humans, we like to communicate, and we like people like concerts. We like to go to church events, and again, from church events is another area that uses broadcast technology a lot during COVID. A lot of churches, and where you are in Malaysia as well, we've been working on some projects there, again using cloud technologies to bring church services to people at home, rather than cause issues for COVID by trying to bring people together. So, but after COVID, in a post-COVID space, people are going to want to come back, and I think esports with stadium games will be one thing. But people still like to watch television at home, and your television still has that trusted, your national broadcasters, your service providers still have that trusted element. And I think that has been reaffirmed by COVID. And in terms of preparing for the future, I think if anybody was in any doubt of the value of the national broadcasters and the broadcast media in general, the value is, there will be maybe not a great pandemic like this, but in areas when people need trusted news, I think that's absolutely where broadcast comes in, because the social media operators, the Facebooks of this world, they've stepped away. They've said, look, we're just platform operators, because they don't want to edit. They don't want to censor because it's expensive, right? So, and broadcasters spend a lot of money to make sure that, the content and that comes on their channels is suitable for the audience and is suitable for the legal requirements within that country. So that's, broadcasters have invested that money, and they should be given the accolades for having invested in that money and running that trusted media distribution, because it's important, and the validity and the importance of that really came out during COVID, I believe.
Thank you, Dr. Fintan. It's really been exciting talking with you and looking at what the future is like. So television is going to be here. Television is going to be around for a long time, just as radio is.
It's here to stay, and it's getting better.
And probably with the immersive technologies, and you said it started with a green screen, And today, it's just more than that with all the AI and VR and so forth.